I always believed blood was thicker than water. Growing up, my brother Mason and I were inseparable. Only 2 years apart, we shared everything: toys, secrets, dreams. Our parents raised us to believe family always came first, no matter what. In this world, you'll always have each other, Dad would say during our family dinners. Mom would nod in agreement, her eyes filled with pride as she watched us. I'm Eliza Carter, 32 years old, and until last year, I thought I knew what family meant. The headaches started small, just occasional twinges that I blamed on stress from my job as an architectural designer. Then came the fatigue, the unexplained weight loss, and finally, the day I collapsed during a client presentation. The diagnosis hit like a thunderbolt. IgA nephropathy, my kidneys were failing. You'll need dialysis immediately, my nephrologist, Dr. Winters, explained gently, and eventually, a transplant. The next few months became a blur of hospital visits, dialysis sessions 3 times a week, and a steadily declining quality of life. My design firm put me on medical leave, and my savings began to dwindle under the weight of medical bills not covered by insurance. Through it all, my parents were my rocks. Mom moved temporarily into my apartment to help care for me, while Dad drove 2 hours each way, 3 times a week, to sit with me during dialysis. Have you told Mason? Mom asked one evening as she changed my bedsheets while I rested, exhausted from another dialysis session. I hadn't. Mason had moved to Chicago 5 years ago to start his tech company, and we'd grown apart. Our conversations had dwindled to obligatory holiday calls and the occasional text message. Still, he was my brother. I'll call him tonight, I promised. Mason answered on the 4th ring. Liz, this is a surprise. Everything okay? I took a deep breath and explained my situation. There was silence on the other end. That's tough, he finally said, his voice strangely detached. But you're getting treatment, right? You'll be fine. I need a kidney transplant, Mason. The waiting list is years long unless I find a direct donor. Another pause. What are you saying? I'm not asking you to donate, I clarified quickly, though the thought had crossed my mind. I just wanted you to know what's happening. Maybe you could come visit sometime. It's been hard. Yeah, of course. I mean, things are crazy here with the company. We're in the middle of a funding round, and I barely have time to sleep, but I'll try to make it out there soon. He never came. The weeks turned into months. Mason sent a generic get well bouquet once with a card signed by his assistant. When Mom called to tell him how serious my condition had become, he always had an excuse: investor meetings, product launches, business trips. Then Dr. Winters delivered the news that changed everything. We've checked your family members for compatibility, she said during one of my appointments. Your brother is a match, Eliza. Hope fluttered in my chest. That's great news, right? Dr. Winters nodded cautiously. Yes, but we haven't been able to reach him directly to discuss donation. We've left several messages. That night, I called Mason myself. The hospital's been trying to reach you, I said without preamble when he answered. You're a match, Mason. A match for what? He asked, though I could tell from his voice he already knew. For a kidney donation. You can save my life. The silence stretched so long, I thought we'd been disconnected. I can't do that, Liz, he finally said. I'm sorry. I felt like I'd been slapped. What do you mean you can't? My company is at a critical juncture. The recovery time alone would tank everything I've built. There are hundreds of people depending on me. And I'm depending on you to help me live, I whispered. There are other donors, other options, he said dismissively. I just can't risk everything right now. Maybe in a year or 2. The doctors say I don't have a year. I cut in, my voice breaking. Mason, please. I'm sorry, Liz, I truly am. But I just can't. After we hung up, I stared at the wall for hours, the betrayal burning like acid in my throat. When Mom found me the next morning, still sitting in the same spot, she knew something was wrong. He said no, I told her, my voice hollow. He won't do it. The look of shock and disappointment on my mother's face mirrored my own feelings. Dad was less restrained. That's selfish, ungrateful. He started, pacing my small living room. After everything we've done for him, his own sister. My parents called Mason themselves that night. I could hear Dad's raised voice from my bedroom, Mom's tearful pleas. It made no difference. Mason's decision was final. 2 weeks later, a miracle happened. An anonymous donor was found through the hospital's paired exchange program. Someone who didn't match their intended recipient matched me, and my paired donor matched them. I would get my transplant after all. The surgery was successful, and slowly, I began to recover. Life started to return to something resembling normal. I went back to work part-time, began rebuilding my strength, and tried to move past Mason's betrayal. 6 months after my transplant, I received an unexpected call. "Liz, it's me." Mason's voice sounded different, strained, desperate. "I need to talk to you. It's important." Despite everything, curiosity got the better of me. "I'm listening." "My company's in trouble. Our main product had a fatal flaw that we didn't catch before launch. There's a class action lawsuit, and investors are pulling out." He took a shaky breath. "I'm on the verge of losing everything." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, surprised to find I actually meant it. Whatever he'd done, I didn't wish ruin upon him. "The thing is," he continued, his voice brightening slightly, "there's a way to save it. A new investor is willing to step in, but they want co-investors to show confidence in the company's future. I need to raise $250,000 to secure their backing." I nearly laughed. "And you're calling me for this?" "You're the only one I can turn to," he said, his voice taking on the sincere tone I remembered from our childhood, the one he used when trying to convince me to cover for him after breaking Mom's favorite bass. "Dad won't take my calls, and Mom just cries. But you've always understood me, Liz. You know I wouldn't ask if it wasn't absolutely critical." "How much are you asking for?" I was curious to hear the figure. $100,000. "I know it's a lot, but it would be an investment, not a gift. You get equity in the company. Once we turn things around, you could double or triple your money." The audacity was breathtaking. This was the same brother who couldn't risk everything to save my life, now asking me to risk my financial security to save his business. "Can I think about it?" I asked, fighting to keep my voice level. "Of course," he said, relief evident in his tone. "But I do need to know soon. By the end of the week. I'll call you," I promised before hanging up. That night, I pulled out the stack of medical bills I'd accumulated during my illness. Insurance had covered much of it, but my out-of-pocket expenses still totaled over $30,000. Money had drained from my savings, took loans for, and was still paying off. I also found the journal I'd kept during my illness. The record of my fear, my pain, and yes, my anger at Mason's abandonment when I needed him most. By morning, I knew what I needed to do. We agreed to meet at a coffee shop near my apartment. It was the first time I'd seen Mason in nearly 3 years. He looked different, thinner, with dark circles under his eyes and a nervous energy that made him drum his fingers constantly on the table. "Thank you for meeting me," he said, attempting a smile. "It means a lot." I nodded but didn't return the smile. "So I've brought some materials about the company," he continued, pulling out a folder. "Financial projections, information about our products, the term sheet for the investment." "I've made my decision," I interrupted, placing my own folder on the table. Hope flickered across his face. "That's great. I knew I could count on you, Liz. You've always been the compassionate one." Without a word, I opened the folder and spread out the contents: medical bills, dialysis records, and a copy of the letter from the hospital confirming his match as a donor and his refusal. Mason stared at the documents, his expression morphing from confusion to discomfort. "What is this?" he asked, though it was clear he knew. "This is what it cost me when you couldn't risk everything for my life," I said calmly. "This is what I had to face alone while you were busy building your precious company." "Liz, that was different," he began, lowering his voice as a nearby patron glanced our way. "That was a medical decision. This is business." "No, Mason," I cut him off. "That was a family decision. You chose your business over my life. And now you want me to choose your business over my financial security?" He had the grace to look ashamed, at least momentarily. "I know how it looks, but I'm desperate here. Everything I've worked for is about to collapse. And when I was desperate, when doctors told me I might die without a transplant," I kept my voice steady, though my hands trembled slightly under the table. "Where was your desperation then?" "That's not fair," he protested weakly. "Fair?" I nearly laughed. Was it fair when I had to face my mortality alone while my brother was too busy for even a phone call? Was it fair when Mom had to quit her job to care for me because you wouldn't even visit? Mason's eyes darted around the coffee shop, clearly uncomfortable with the direction of our conversation. Look, I made a mistake, okay? I should have been there for you. But punishing me now won't change the past. This isn't punishment, I said, gathering the medical documents and returning them to the folder. This is consequence. You showed me exactly where I stand in your list of priorities. Now I'm showing you where you stand in mine. I stood up, slinging my bag over my shoulder. I won't be investing in your company, Mason. And honestly, I'm not sure I want to invest in our relationship either. His face darkened. So that's it? You're just going to walk away when I need you? The irony of his question wasn't lost on me. Funny how that feels, isn't it? As I turned to leave, he called after me. Dad was right about you, always so self-righteous, holding grudges. This is why I stayed away. I froze, turning back slowly. What did you just say? Mason seemed to realize his mistake immediately, his face flushing. Nothing. Forget it. No, I stepped back to the table, lowering my voice. What did Dad say about me? Mason sighed, running a hand through his hair. It was nothing. Just something he said years ago when we were arguing about me moving to Chicago. He said you always had to be the perfect child, that you held everyone to impossible standards. The revelation stung, but I pushed past it. And that's why you couldn't spare a kidney for your dying sister. Because I'm self-righteous. It wasn't like that, he muttered. Then what was it like, Mason? Help me understand why my own brother left me to die. The raw honesty of my question seemed to penetrate his defenses. For a moment, the corporate facade dropped, and I saw a glimpse of the brother I'd grown up with. I was scared, he admitted quietly. The company was already having problems. But more than that, I was terrified of the surgery, of what might happen to me. He looked down at his hands. It was easier to hide behind work than admit I was a coward. His confession should have moved me, perhaps even led to reconciliation. Instead, it just confirmed what I already knew. When it mattered most, Mason would always choose himself. Goodbye, Mason, I said finally. I hope you find your investor. This time, he didn't try to stop me as I walked away. News of our confrontation spread quickly through the family. Mom called that evening, her voice heavy with disappointment, not in me, but in the situation. He's still your brother, she said softly, despite everything. I know, I acknowledged, but knowing we're related by blood doesn't change the fact that when I needed him most, he wasn't there. People make mistakes, Eliza, sometimes terrible ones. This wasn't a mistake, Mom. It was a choice. Multiple choices made day after day for months. She sighed deeply. Your father and I are caught in the middle here. No, you're not, I corrected gently. You were there for me every step of the way. You've already chosen, and Mason knows it. The family splintered in the aftermath. Some relatives sided with Mason, arguing that donating an organ was a personal choice no one should be pressured into. Others stood firmly with me, outraged by his abandonment during my illness and his subsequent audacity in asking for money. Dad, surprisingly, tried to mediate. You're both my children, he told me during a tense dinner. I can't choose between you. You don't have to choose, I assured him. I'm not asking anyone to cut Mason off. I'm just choosing to protect myself from someone who's proven they won't be there when it matters. 3 months later, I received a small package in the mail. Inside was a check for $30,000 and a handwritten note from Mason. Liz, this doesn't begin to repay what I owe you, but it's a start. The company's gone. Bankruptcy was finalized last week. Turns out I couldn't save it even with the investor's help. I'm moving back home next month. Got a job at Davis Tech downtown. It's not what I dreamed of, but it's something. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I'm not even asking for it. But I am asking for a chance to show you that I've changed, that I can be the brother you deserved all along. If you're willing, I'd like to meet. Your terms, your place, your time. Either way, this money is yours. It covers your medical bills, but it can't cover my absence when you needed me. Nothing can. Mason. I stared at the check for a long time, emotions warring within me. The money would help immensely with my remaining medical debt, but accepting it felt complicated, like putting a price tag on the betrayal. In the end, I deposited the check and texted Mason. Sunday, 2 p.m. The park bench by the lake where we used to feed ducks as kids. His reply came instantly. I'll be there. Thank you. I don't know what will happen when we meet. Maybe we'll find a way forward, or maybe we'll confirm that some breaches can't be repaired. What I do know is that I'm no longer the same person who believed family obligation trumps all else, regardless of how you're treated. Sometimes the family you choose, the friends who show up, the colleagues who sent cards, the anonymous donor who gave me a kidney when my own brother wouldn't, proves more reliable than the family you're born into. And sometimes, the most important lesson family can teach you is that love without respect and action is just an empty word. I don't regret walking away from Mason that day in the coffee shop. I don't regret showing him the consequences of his choices. What I do regret is that it took nearly losing my life to understand what truly matters. Not blind loyalty to family, but loyalty to those who demonstrate through their actions that they deserve it. As I wait to meet my brother this Sunday, I'm not looking for apologies or explanations. I'm looking for evidence that he's capable of change, and if he isn't, I'm finally strong enough to walk away for good. My new kidney functioning perfectly, my heart healing slowly, and my understanding of family forever transformed.